Maze. My name is Jason, and it's a pleasure to be with you. This is my second live today, actually. You know why? Well, really third. I did a YouTube short as well to notify you that I'm also going to do a live Wednesday, May 21st at 5 p.m. I really hope you'll join me for that one too, my friends. It'll be epic. We're going to talk for about a good hour, okay? This one, we'll see how long we go, maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes, but I hope you stay with me, everyone, because first of all, I just want to tell you, the YouTube community out there, thank you again for listening to me. I'm a new channel, of course, just trying to grow this channel. And yet, the YouTube engineers, somebody at YouTube, they're blurring lives. I've had 2 lives in a row that I've ever done talking about the all-important Idaho4 case. That's right, 2 lives have been blurred. Who the hell wants to listen to me for an hour when the video's blurred? And YouTube knows that. So I hope they'll do the right thing. These YouTube engineers and people that own YouTube, the intelligence communities out there, because I do talk about the intelligence communities and will again on the Idaho4 case. We got to, my friends, the ones that are in charge of this investigation. You know, the 3-letter agencies, right? FBI, CIA, along with, of course, your law enforcement regulars. So I hope this live doesn't get blurred. I really do. I hope they play fair with me. So, and again, I'm thankful to use the YouTube platform. And, you know, on my lives, everyone, as much as I condemn sometimes the feds, you know, elements of FBI, CIA for their lies and misinformation, because really when you look at, for example, the CIA, my friends, the mandate of them literally is to lie, deny, and deceive at the expense of American taxpayers. And it affects my Canadian people largely too, my friends. That's how the CIA works. That's their mandate. Did you know that? And at times, especially in criminal investigations, for example, and if they want to cover up something and use corporate media, the mandate again is to lie, deny, and deceive. Much of their operations are that way. So we got to be careful here, everyone. And I think I asked the public, how many of you out there just want to refuse to be hoodwinked and lied to? Because that's exactly what we're being led to believe. We're being spoon-fed. In my opinions, everyone, we are absolutely being spoon-fed this regurgitated diarrhea nonsense, these lies. And one of the biggest lie of them all, in my opinion, on the Idaho4 case, guess what? It's the biggest lie is that the students were unalived, as YouTube likes to say, right? That they're no longer with us, that they were stabbed to death, unalived, on November 21st, I believe it was, or was it November 13th? Guys, sometimes I forget. I think it was November 13th or November 22nd, pardon me, at about between 3 and 4 in the morning, right? At 1122 King Road. We're supposed to believe that it happened. But my videos and my lives, my friends, I'm trying to show you that I truly believe when you connect the dots and you use reason, logic, common sense, you don't buy into this emotional PSYOP, because that's all it is, my friends, largely, from elements of the FBI and the feds, the corporate media, CIA. It's all a PSYOP, everybody. The students are in fact alive. This was an extraction operation. And again, I give credit to the feds. They were surveilling those students. They ultimately did their job and they protected the students. Why wouldn't they? Think about it, everyone. And again, reason, logic, common sense with everything that's transpired. You know, the whole narrative of the students being unalived. Why wouldn't the feds have been protecting them all along? Obviously, there was most likely, has been talked about, a confidential informant, probably living inside 1122 King Road, whether it be Bethany Funk. A lot of people think she was one of the informants. I think Kaylee Gonzalez as well was working in some capacities in a criminal investigation with the feds. This is speculation, but I think of all the students, you know, of the 4 anyways, say of Bethany Funk, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xander Cornudo, Ethan Chapman, the ones that were supposed to believe that were unalived. I think Kaylee Gonzalez, she's very shrewd, very intelligent. She's got the background. Her father, Steve G, he's a Fed, my friends. I truly believe that, and Birdie thinks so as well, and many other people, right? So I think Kaylee Gonzalez very well could have been working herself, you know, in a criminal investigation. And one of the people, whether it be Kaylee Gonzalez or Bethany Funk, if they were a confidential informant, their cover was probably blown. And remember, I mean, just look at the grub truck, everyone. Do you remember? I'm sure many of you are aware that know this case well. As they're heading to the grub truck, didn't Madison say to Kaylee Gonzalez, or Kaylee asked Madison, what did you tell Adam? And Madison said, I told him everything. And everybody's been trying to figure out, what did Madison tell Adam? What did Adam know? And how does this relate to what went down that night at 1122 King Road? Whatever it was, my friends, regardless, the feds knew all this. They knew they had to extract those students, I believe, that night. And just look no further. The day before, my friends, a woman reminded me on social media, I thought it was really interesting. She said, Jason, Kaylee Gonzalez, and this was on the mother said this in her interviews on corporate media, I believe, that the mother said that Kaylee Gonzalez, her daughter, photobombed her. This is the day before these so-called atrocities happened, right, everyone? And as the woman who said this to me on social media reminded me, she said, I have two daughters that are the same age roughly of Kaylee and Madison. And she said, they have never photobombed me. So my point is it just a coincidence that Kaylee gave all or most of her pictures and God knows what to her mother just before this atrocity? I don't think it's just a coincidence, everyone. And think about it. Remember when Kaylee is texting? There were moments at the grub truck where she's constantly texting as it gets closer and closer to them ultimately being picked up. Who was she texting? She wasn't texting Jack at those early hours because remember, they had just talked to Jack. Jack was near the grub truck, right? Sitting down at the corner club or whatever it was, right? So who was she texting? And she's with Madison. I guess she could be texting Xana Canuto and Ethan Chapman, but she sure as hell kept texting. It was very serious, even though she was drunk, you know, somewhat. I think I surmise, speculate that she was texting a Fed, texting the driver, for example. Very well may have been texting the driver. And who was it that picked them up, for example, my friends, right, from the grub truck? I believe it was the feds. And just look no further than the actual WITSEC program. That's right, WITSEC program. It's spelled WITEC. It's a witness federal protection program, my friends, there in the United States, right? It stands for, the acronym stands for, again, Witness Security Program, also known as the Federal Witness Protection Program in the United States, everyone. And just look at real history here. They will do covert and at times very deep extraction operations, my friends, to protect, again, a confidential informant in particular that's had their cover blown, for example. And here's what really brought it home for me on this theory, everyone. And again, like many of you, I didn't subscribe to this theory, you know, for the first year, let's say, of the Idaho4 case. But when you start to dig in, my friends, the extraction operation, it answers so many unanswered questions that we've had. It really does, I believe, everyone. And again, everyone, when you're involved in the WITSEC program, once the feds get involved and they extract whoever it is, whether it be individuals or groups, in this case, I believe all 4 students, then obviously they get relocated. Anybody can Google this. This is a fact. They'll relocate them, you know. And I said, I believe the 4 students are relocated probably in Costa Rica because apparently the United States has a WITSEC program in in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico it is. But they could be in Costa Rica for all we know too. But again, my friends, one of the standard operating procedures of WITSEC program, of course, we're never going to see the 4 students ever again. We're never going to probably see a digital trail or track of them, right? And they will live, once they're settled, as I said in my last live, they'll live low profile lives, right? Generally speaking. And again, you can Google drivers of WITSEC programs. Don't take my word for it, my friends. When it comes to the drivers, I thought it was kind of interesting because they won't use, of course, civilian drivers, right? So Did a Fed, for example, a U.S. Marshal pick up Keeley and Madison, right? From the grub truck, for example. So when in terms of drivers, it says here, individuals such as high-risk assets, obviously they'll have transportation security that are controlled, it says, by federal agents, not civilian drivers. And it says in rare high-profile cartel-related cases, a government vehicle and armed driver might be assigned temporarily. Isn't that interesting, sort of, everyone? Okay. And then they'll have new identities, again, new locations. We can get in future videos where Birdie and a few others have shown that Keeley apparently has a different name. I think even Madison Mogan, in one of her, I forget, one of her IDs, she has a different name. And that would make sense if they're, if they're in any extraction program or working with the feds in any way, they're going to have different names, right? So again, everyone, these people, everybody that thinks either Brian Kohlberger is this lone assailant in a quadruple homicide, even though they have to admit there's no motive, right? I mean, all of these people, or the people that think the students were actually unalived, they don't look at the alternative theory, which happens. And how about an extraction operation? How about giving credit to the feds that they were surveilling the students? They knew the students were in peril. Why would the feds allow a one-time assailant, one person, to unalive all 4 students? It makes no sense. And why would they even allow a group, let's say more than one assailant, with weapons to unalive the 4 students? There's no way the feds would allow that, my friends. Okay? I believe they rescued these students. And a lot more people are starting to hop onto this theory, and I think for a very good reason. You get amazing YouTubers like Jay Embry. He's doing amazing research on this case. He, I think, correctly shows you, just by even the court docs and things like that, and connecting the dots, that yes, these students were targeted most likely by elements of the Aryan family, the Aryan Knights. It goes back to drugs, goes back to the cartels, right? Xana's stepmother, as Jay Embry shows you, was most likely a confidential informant, and probably the husband as well. Okay, Xana's father. These people were deeply, deeply in the criminal underworld in terms of trafficking drugs, my friends, right? And if they were informants, if they snitched on, say, some Aryan families, Aryan Knights, then yes, the Aryan family, Aryan Knights, they would be after epic retribution. And we know by the model, and this goes with the cartels largely too, my friends, that often they will brutalize or unalive a snitch. But if they can't get to the snitch, right, and sometimes they even choose this on purpose, they will go after instead the actual the parents' children, in this case, young adolescents. All part of the intimidation factor, my friends. These are facts. And I believe it happened in this case, unfortunately. Although, again, it's not that tragic, everyone. The students, we should celebrate this, I believe. They were rescued. Why would the feds, why would they even take a chance and allow any of these students to be unalived by, whether it be Brian Kohlberger or, Aryan family? And again, I understand why Jay Embry thinks that these students were unalived, but I think he's wrong, everyone. Jay Embry, I do not think he looks through the other lens, which is the extraction operation theory. That huge operation, we saw the operation out front, my friends. We saw different people, right? Just before it happened, we saw somebody sitting in a car for 3 to 4 hours, as Jay Embry and others show you. We see them get out of the car, or talking on a cell phone, walking back and forth, pacing, right? We see the dumpster guy, right? Wondering what he's doing. Is he, people that believe there were assailants, they think he may have a weapon at the dumpster or something. It's all part of the PSYOP, I would argue, my friends. Largely, it was theater, and these were federal agents, by and large, that were out front and around that neighborhood and in the neighborhood. Okay? Makes sense. If it's an extraction operation, these are feds, everyone. Now, to make it a little bit more complicating, though, you did have, apparently, you had one gangbanger that was out front. And that obviously, the feds would have known that. And then just all the more reason to get those students the hell out of that house in the cover of darkness around 3:30 in the morning. Apparently the house went completely dark, right, everybody? So Farley is a known gangbanger. And, Jay Embry, Bubbly Waters Bubbly was the first one to cover this, and Jay Embry has shown this and other people where you hear the audio. And it's quite unmistakable if you listen carefully. One of Xana's neighbors in the complex near 1122 King Road, near the house, they shout out, "I see you, Farley, I see you." So yes, my friends, it shows that most likely elements of the Aryan family, the gangbangers, they were trying to get epic retribution, I believe. They were trying to get after these students to do harm to them, let alone unalive them. But I believe the feds, to their credit, my friends, they beat them to it. They got in that house. And as I said on my last live, everyone, Jay Embry, he was the first one to play you the unmistakable audio as well of somebody cocking their gun and then going into the house, right? Just leading up to all of whatever went down. But Jay Embry thinks that was an assailant because that's been his focus. But no. I believe that was a Fed. Think about it, everybody. This is standard operating procedure from U.S. Marshals, a federal agent. If they're going to do an extraction operation, they're going to go into this house and they're absolutely first going to cock their guns and have their guns ready just in case. And again, my friends, if you don't believe my extraction operation theory, how about this? Can you explain to me then, why did Dylan admit that she heard somebody in the house say the night of, they said, "I'm here to help you"? Why would a Brian Kohlberger, or any assailant for that matter, in all the chaos, trying to unalive people, why would they play a mind game and say, "I'm here to help you"? Makes no sense. What makes more sense is that it was a federal agent, my friends, a task force. Covert, I describe it, these are like unacknowledged special access programs or projects that are going on, okay? But I find it also fascinating, some, very few, but some of the police departments in Moscow, Idaho, that were involved in this case, like Chief Fry, I believe he absolutely knows, my friends, that these students were extracted. He would have to know. And I think he even hinted at it in his press conference, because I believe it was him. Didn't he say something to the effect of, "We usually get there before anything happens"? And I think he's telling in his own way, my friends, the world, subliminally, he knows that they did get to those students before any unaliving could have taken place, okay? Now, to make this case more complicated, but again, it's just part of the PSYOP, I believe, everybody. I hope you look at it from this point of view. This confused me too at the very beginning, or for quite a while. You see, again, law enforcement, the feds, they had to have something visual for us to take in to believe that these atrocities happened. Otherwise, there is no direct evidence that it even happened, my friends. And what was that visual? That was the red, and I don't want to sound too morbid, everyone, but I think it was just pig's blood or paint. Remember the red on the foundation of the house, right? But we're supposed to believe, it was because we're being told it was such a bloody crime scene, quadruple homicide. They were all stabbed, right? We're supposed to believe that this red, this blood, seeped from the foundation of the house. No. Do you know how easy it would be for law enforcement and with a forensic, forensic scientist or investigator, just paint a little bit of blood or pig's blood or a cop? They can do this, my friends. This is part of their job, okay? And I believe that's all it was. And in my last live, and I'm going to keep explaining this, everyone, I'm going to keep defining to you and explain to you, because it's so important, I believe, what is a PSYOP? Some of you may already be asking, Jason, what is a PSYOP? Well, let's put it this way. There's three different PSYOPs, first of all. You have strategic, you have tactical, and you have operational PSYOP. And of course, PSYOP, the derivative, there's different words. It stands for hearts and minds, right? I'm sure a lot of you have heard, of course, psychological operations. And a PSYOP can be defined as any activity. And I want you to think of the Idaho4 case, my friends, and everything that transpired when I tell you this. It's any activity that's practiced mainly by psychological methods with the aim of elucidating or evoking a planned psychological reaction in another person. Think about the Idaho4 case, right? My friends, in many other cases, they've done this where the elements of FBI, CIA in particular, they'll use corporate media for this curated narrative. And this narrative we see in the Idaho4 case, my friends, and you hear it from people all the time, the way they respond, it's they want people to be emotionally charged, to think, yes, there was this unaliving. The students are no longer with us, unfortunately. And it's all horseshit, my friends. It's a stage psyop. It's all theater, in my opinion, to everyone. Okay? Another way of explaining what a psyop is, it's when you take selected information and indicators to an audience to influence a person or group's behaviors, attitudes, right? Value systems at times, belief systems, and or objective reasoning. That's what a PSYOP is, everyone. And of course, we know the military often conducts PSYOPs, right? The cops, police, they're trained to also do PSYOPs. And this is what has largely gone on, I believe, in the Idaho4 case, my friends. And it was basically a strategic operational extraction PSYOP, man. Okay? And using corporate media for this PSYOP, right? And also part of a PSYOP, of course, everyone, it's an important part of the originator's objectives. Who is the originator's objective of this PSYOP? Well, obviously, it's elements of the FBI, right? CIA, all these, and some of these departments, people that are involved in this covert, huge criminal investigation. Because again, my friends, it goes back to the cartels, doesn't it? And the Aryan family, Aryan Knights, all the drug running largely, right? We saw the drug bust. We saw a massive drug bust happened, just before the so-called atrocity happened, right, everyone? And then, what was it, a month or two later? Feel free to leave me in the comment, everyone. You had a massive drug bust in Washington State, where Briankohberger is from, right? And we'll talk about him in a moment. But before I go on, everyone, I meant to say at the beginning of this live and all my videos, please, if you enjoy my videos, if you think I have value to share with humanity, I hope you do. I hope you might subscribe to this channel. I need some help. Again, am I being throttled? My lives seem to go blurry. I hope YouTube will help me out here, do the right thing and not blur this live. I hope everyone, if you enjoy my videos, you'll smash that like button. Again, that helps with the algorithms as well, apparently. Hit the bell icon too. You get notified for future videos. And the videos ultimately get to you. And feel free to leave me a comment. And that helps with the algorithms. And I read them. And again, I appreciate your engagement. I really do, everyone. Okay? And I appreciate you caring about the Idaho4 case, because this is a vitally important case for the future, especially for you Americans out there. It really is. I mean, we'll talk about future videos, but just look at the DNA and how the FBI, they didn't even show much of their work on how they got this DNA and ultimately connected it to Briankohberger, right? Using the IgG, the forensic genealogy. Even Ann Taylor, the defense attorney, and I believe she knows the students are alive and well. They've been extracted. They weren't unalive. She knows this, my friends, in my opinion. But Ann Taylor, she showed the world in front of the judge. She even said the FBI, they doubled the SNP size of the DNA when they got it from Othram Labs. The only way the DNA can double in size, my friends, is if it's been manipulated. Anybody can look into this. So again, my friends, there's a lot of questions about the FBI. So again, just showing you real history here, my friends. We know in the last decade even, a lot of false flags, like 9/11, for example, right? We saw how the governments, the FBI, CIA, etc., they used 9/11 to help to override our rights, my friends. And this happens at times. We got to be very careful. Some of these false flag operations, I believe Idaho4 is very similar. They will try to obtain information, the feds, and they'll do it illegally, but then they'll use the court proceedings, court law, especially in front of a judge, and they'll use loopholes, and they'll try to make this legal, my friends. And when it comes to DNA, we got to be very careful. We got to be hyper vigilant, everyone. We got to protect, all innocent people, or family, or children, because look what happened, with the Briankohberger case. It's very similar, everyone. We don't want there's a way to get people's DNA and there's reasons and times for it, but we don't want them to set illegal and very dangerous precedents here, everyone. And Birdie sort of talked about this as well. Please support Birdie if you want, everyone, on YouTube and TikTok. He's doing amazing work. And those of you that listen to this live today, I hope you might want to reach out, some of you, to Birdie. Hopefully you'll pump up my tires, tell him I'm articulate and intelligent, and that you think that we could do an epic live, hopefully, together. I think Birdie and I could have some great chemistry. Obviously, I'll let him to do a lot of talking, but I think I can add some valuable information on the Idaho4 case as well. Maybe open his eyes a little bit to some things that he may not have thought of. And we can bounce our ideas off one another. I would love and be privileged and honored to interview someone like a Birdie. So I hope some of you out there will reach out to him for me. I've reached out to Birdie, I think just on his videos, but I don't know how to connect. I don't know how to contact this guy. He hasn't replied. I don't know if he's receiving my messages. So I could use your help, okay? Thank you. Anyway, now, my friends, I could go on and on. We could talk for hours on the Idaho4, but I just did a live just literally like an hour or two ago by the time this is uploaded. And again, YouTube had my video blurred. What the hell's going on here? I hope this one isn't. So I hope you get this video out, everyone. Please share it if you would. Subscribe, all that good stuff. And finally, everyone, I'll just say what anybody who's using reason, logic, common sense in this case, and thankfully there's many thousands of you that are seeing this case for what it is. And when it comes to Brian Kohlberger, many of you are understanding and seeing that this guy is almost certainly an FBI plant. Again, everyone, it's real facts. Real history shows you that elements of FBI, CIA, they will literally embed university students in academic positions, sometimes high academic positions. They will groom them, and they will use them sometimes even in criminal investigations to go dark, whether it be to flip them as an informant, to get information, expose some of the criminal underworld, right? To help law enforcement, to help the feds. This is a real reality, my friends. Was Brian Kohlberger used as a government plant? I believe yes. What was he exactly used for, my friends? Well, I think we're seeing it right now. Part of what he was used for and groomed over several years, we're seeing it now, my friends. Brian Kohlberger has willingly, for the most part, I believe, working with the feds, he's agreed to be almost like a crisis actor. He's used as the distraction, my friends, as part of this strategic PSYOP, isn't he? We know, anyone knows, reason, logic, common sense. First of all, he's not capable of doing a quadruple homicide physically. Come on. In 12 to 8 minutes or whatever it would take. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Again, he had no motive, right? All the guilters have to admit there's no identifiable connection of Brian Kohlberger to the victims, the family, or the residents, or even the communities from out of state, which is all part of the convenient narrative for corporate media, my friends, and law enforcement. Okay? So how and why is Brian being used in the way he's used as distraction, everyone? If you focus on Brian Kohlberger, especially if you think he's guilty, or you're arguing with other people constantly, Brian Kohlberger is innocent to other people that think he's guilty, that's all part of the distraction, my friends, from the FBI. They do not want you focused on the real reality, I believe, which is the feds actually rescued the students. Yeah, under a WITSEC program. Okay? It's all government related. They're all protected. They're probably living in places like Costa Rica or Puerto Rico, most likely. Again, they are protected. The feds did their job, my friends. They weren't going to let anybody like a Brian Kohlberger, let alone the Aryan family or cartel members, they were going to let them do a hit on these students. The feds were surveilling these students, my friends. You literally had at least one student, probably 1122 King Road, literally working with the feds in some capacity. These drug investigations, my friends, the rabbit hole is so deep, right? So again, speculation, but either Bethany Funk was a confidential informant, Kaylee Gonzalez may have also been another confidential informant, or the only one. I think Kaylee in some way was a confidential informant. I could be wrong, but I say Kaylee, my friends, because her father, Steve G, this is why I get so excited. Birdie was right. Birdie even laughed at himself when he told you on his videos that Steve G totally looks like a Fed. right? And then he added, he acts like a Fed. We'll do whole videos on Steve G someday. I'll go over all his behaviors and the way he talks, my friends. He talks like a Fed, and he's added all this misinformation and disinformation, in my opinion, and lies to the public. He goes on and on, you know, in interviews. Oh, they didn't have to go up to the third floor, meaning to get his daughter, right? In Madison. Oh, they didn't have to go there. Then he gives you just a little bit of details that supposedly Kaylee had worse injuries. And yet, as part of being a Fed, everyone, he composed himself, right? And he just releases just a certain amount of details. Because again, he's probably signed a non-disclosure with FBI, the feds, whatever. Again, everyone, Steve G, you can't trust him, unfortunately. And my heart still goes out to him in some ways, because from the videos that we saw, it seems like he had a good, solid relationship largely with Kaylee Gonzalez, his daughter. And he's hardly ever going to see her, if at all, ever again, my friends. So in that way, I have total sympathy for Steve G. But where I get frustrated, my friends, and I think most of us should be, is that Steve G is lying to you. And even people that believe that his daughter was unalived, unfortunately, Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapman, Xander Canuto, those same people often you see on social media, right, everyone? They're seeing all these thousands of dollars that apparently Steve G and his wife are receiving. And they're saying, why is he receiving, like, what is it, $50,000, $100,000 or more? Why is he receiving all this money on the back end of his daughter's death? And I think he's even asking for money, if I'm not mistaken. But he's certainly receiving it. Why? And where do you think the money's going, my friends? I got news for you. The money, I believe, is going to, and another YouTuber said this too, the money is going towards Kaylee Gonzalez, her new lifestyle, most likely, and the other students, probably in the other families, right? Madison Mogen, Xander Canuto, and Ethan Chapman. They are alive, my friends, under witness protection. This whole thing was a PSYOP. And to protect, you know, they obviously, my friends, because the feds, they didn't want their criminal investigation to be derailed, right? They couldn't have that happen. They had to make the students seem to the public that they were unalived, and they had to try to convince certain cartels out there or gang members that indeed these students were targeted, and a hit was taken place and actually executed. That's all it is, my friends. It's complete fabrication, in my opinion. It never happened. The feds protected them. And this is good news. I hope more and more people will embrace this good news, my friends, right? Instead of thinking that they've been unalived and stabbed, you know, it's all nonsense. And again, here's the tell too, my friends. So many red flags. In an extraction operation, I said this on my last slide, did you know, because again, if in fact the students are alive, just like any extraction operation where you're rescuing somebody and you're staging all this, did you know that you're never ever going to see an open casket ceremony? Never. It doesn't happen. That's a fact. And what did we see in the Idaho4 case, my friends? Did any of us see on TV or anybody, the residences or people that lived in Moscow, Idaho, or the relatives of the family members, did they ever have an open casket ceremony for the unalived 4 students? No. Now, with Ethan Chapman, they had to have, you know, the feds had to put some misinformation there. They claimed that the family of Ethan Chapman had a private funeral, right? A private service. No, my friends, they're alive, in my opinion. Again, I got to keep repeating. So, and by the way, everyone, if you really think that the students were unalived, those of you that do, then explain to me, why have we not seen any raw crime scene footage in all this time, my friends? Again, this happened in November 13th, I believe, 2022, so-called atrocity, and yet we're in 2025 now. The hearing started. The trial is coming up in November or in August, right? Can't wait for that. The hearings have been fascinating on some levels, but why have we not seen any raw crime scene footage? And why do I ask that? Because we know almost every high-profile case, my friends, especially nowadays with corporate media, with all their money, all their connections, all their influence, you know, controlled largely by CIA at times. Obviously, many times, most times, they get crime scene footage, whether it be one or more. We haven't seen anything, my friends. And I think that would obviously point towards, most likely, again, these students were extracted by the feds, deep undercover, my friends, under WITSEC program, witness protection, okay? And again, we could go on and on. The coroner, you know, Karen, was it Karen Abbott? I forget her name, my friends. Sorry, but the coroner, I think she's probably bought and paid for it too. You know, any statements that she makes claiming that the students were unalived or stabbed, it's all horseshit. It's all part of the PSYOP, in my opinion, everyone. And I bet you that the feds will never allow that coroner to actually testify in this trial. We'll see, but I doubt it. I doubt it, my friends. And you can't believe anything she says, in my opinion, anyway. You really can't. So, and no autopsy photos probably will ever be shown, even though they could try to fake that, the feds, you know. So again, I think there's a lot of dots we can connect, everyone, that these students are in fact, again, alive. All right. There's a lot more I could tell you, my friends, and say, and I think in future lives, hopefully we'll do, I'll try to do more of like a professional presentation, kind of like what Birdie does, put some slides up for you, okay? And then on the weekends, we'll have more fun, and I'll do it like now, where I'm just winging out a lot of information, and then put on my reading glasses like I did earlier, maybe read some information, okay, on the Idaho4 case. Because this is such, again, important, wild, crazy, fascinating case. And this case, again, my friends, has a lot of potential ramifications for law. And for, if we're not careful and we're not hyper vigilant in spreading the truth and safeguarding our rights, our human rights and freedoms, everyone, this case has the potential for deep state evil players out there, a small group, to try to override our rights potentially, my friends, for future, okay, and for our children. We've got to be careful here, okay? And I think that's another important discussion to have, and that has to do with the DNA in this case of the Idaho4 and how it's collected, you know, how they get the DNA, how the FBI, we know in this case, apparently they went on illegally, they went on to, what was it, groups of those media platforms that gather DNA or whatever it is. I don't even know how to articulate that part. But anyway, I'm starting to ramble now. I got to go, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Again, I never saw anybody on the chat page today. I hope it's not set on a private setting again. I don't know how to change it. I thought I had it on a public setting. We'll fix that, though, I promise, everyone. Thank you for listening, though, those of you that eventually listen to this video when I get it published publicly. And I hope YouTube, Deep State, I hope they do the right thing and do not allow this video to be blurred. There's no reason it should be blurred. I got a good camera. You know, other people have said when they saw my recent lives, they said, this doesn't happen to anybody else getting blurred like this. It's crazy. Anyway, thanks for listening, everyone. I'm not going to cry about it. Take care. Hope you share this video and subscribe to my channel and do all that good stuff. Thanks, everyone. Got to go. Till next time. Bye-bye. This is ESTEY'S Crime Base.